Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the War of Ideas. This is, I think, our first solo show ever. So forgive me if I am a little bit rusty on all of the technology, on all of the live stream stuff. I am a Luddite, both in real life. I'm very stupid with technology, but also to fulfill the stereotype of not liking progress, which, we have to pay some tribute to the caricature stereotypes every once in a while. And let's just say my failure with technology is a heavy commitment to the bit. But anyway, as you can see, I'm not wearing my usual suit. I'm wearing a flannel. This was not an intentional choice, actually. It just kind of worked out that way. This is not part of committing to the bit. But today we have a lot to talk about. Primarily, we want to talk about our retrospective with Vaush. So, for those of you who do not know, myself, Don, um, Thomas, Tart, and the rest of the crew over at the Royal Rumble sat down and talked to Vaush. She's a very famous leftist streamer, YouTuber, um, interesting guy. We talked to him. I talked to him quite a bit. We disagreed on quite a lot. And I wanted to go over the conversation because there was a few things that I felt like did not get explained or explored in the depth that I would like. And part of that's just due to the nature of the Royal Rumble, but also part of that's due to the fact that I'm, fallible. And, in hindsight, there was a couple of points that I thought I could have made in a smarter or better way. There's also something that none of you saw in the Royal Rumble. This is as Vaush's comments after the fact on his own stream that I have cooked up for you guys. And so we can look at that too and laugh at it. But unfortunately, the clips for Vaush that I'm talking about, I have 3 for you, but don't worry, I'll make them last. Those 3 clips are currently uploading, and my Wi-Fi is horrible. So what we're going to talk about first is the news. First and foremost of which is the news we did not get to on yesterday's Royal Rumble. So Vaush was 2 weeks ago. Yesterday Royal Rumble was we were talking to Daily Dose of Wisdom, a Christian apologist, and so we didn't get to all the political news, and I wanted to go into depth on it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, which is something that was on our agenda yesterday, but we didn't get to talk about, was Russell Brand. So for those who do not know, Russell Brand was a famous actor, especially in the early 2010s. Now he's still famous, but he's very much shifted away from the kind of hedonistic Hollywood lifestyle into more Joe Rogan-ish territory. He's not exactly a right-winger, but he's married now. He has kids. He does cold showers. He preaches virtue and self-control, and he's very much Joe Rogan-esque, except with a little bit more mysticism. He even gives Jordan Peterson a run for his money in terms of kookiness. He's really interesting to listen to, although pretty exhausting. But that's not the point. The point is that Russell Brand has been accused of sexual assault, and not in the modern day, but back in around 2012, back in his swinging days. Obviously, this is bad. But of course, the question is are these allegations credible? Are they real? They are very late. So Russell Brand has immediately denied everything. He has said that they're not true, and he has talked about how the media is essentially lying about him because he has come out against things like Big Pharma. He has come out against the Ukrainian war in many ways. I haven't really watched his show, but I know, again, he's in a more Joe Rogan angle, so he's at some level counter mainstream. Some people consider Rogan mainstream, but in terms of like mainstream media, he's very counter to them. So he has framed this attack as very much an artificiality in order to take him off the pedestal. That may be true. So let's talk about the allegations. Again, I don't have the clips for you right now because they take so long to upload. I didn't have time. I'm very sorry. Again, Luddite. Next show, we will have clips uploaded far in advance. I was not expecting the million-year wait time. But I know it happened because I pay attention to things. So you can just take my word for it. And then, not really. You can listen to me and then you can go check for yourself to make sure. So he was accused by multiple women. None of the women sent text messages to a couple of mainstream media outlets, and then the messages were read by paid actresses, which is very weird. They knew that they were paid actresses. It's not like they faked it. It's like they just wanted to inject more emotion in the text instead of just having an anchor read the text, or having the real woman come on the show and then giving her the anonymity screen, which you can do with modern computer technology. Instead, they had paid actors read it, and the long and short of it is basically only one allegation has any supporting evidence. The other two allegations are very much he said, she said things. And this isn't really the women's fault. It's just this is kind of how this type of horrific crime or alleged crime is it's very much a only the two people in the room where it happened knows if there was consent or not, and that's very difficult for a justice system to deal with. But is in fact the case. And in many of these instances, there's not a whole lot of supporting or corroborating evidence, just really the woman's word about something that happened 10 years ago that she had not reported beforehand. Do I know if Russell Brand did it? Of course, I don't know. From everything I understand about what Russell Brand was like in those days, he was pretty much a sex maniac of the highest degree, which is immoral behavior in a very serious way, but isn't exactly illegal. But this is just to say that it's possible Russell Brand did do these things, but the problem is that these allegations are not particularly supported, all except for one. So we'll talk about that one allegation, then we'll talk about this type of culture that we've created for ourselves around these allegations that I find to be so destructive. So the one allegation that is somewhat credible is a woman who says that she was assaulted by Russell Brand, and immediately after the same day, she went and got a rape test, a rape kit. I think she was in California at the time. Her underwear were kept as evidence, and she has documentation of going to the rape kit place. Essentially, she has documentation of the same day that she alleges it happened, going and doing that. From what I understand, Russell Brand is going to take a longer time to respond to this one specifically. But as far as I'm aware, he's denying all of it, but he wants more time to respond to this one about why it's not true. We can't really know. I mean, if it goes to court, it goes to court. We'd have to see it adjudicated, but I think getting beyond a reasonable doubt is going to be is rather difficult. It does show that if she went and got rape tested, it does show it is real supporting evidence for what she says that was non-consensual. It is very real supporting evidence. I'm curious to see what Brand will say in his defense, because I'm not going to lie, this particular one doesn't look very good. What I will say, though, is this broader problem of the knee-jerk reaction to this sort of stuff is a natural level of distrust, at least from me. Now, why is that? It is not because I hate women. I love women. I think women need to be protected and honored much more than they are right now. But we have had a history over the last 10 years of lots of allegations, especially ones against Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice, of allegations like this that are made much, much after the fact, with not a whole hell of a lot of supporting evidence, and not and in the case of Kavanaugh, there was actually evidence to the contrary. Like the friends that the accuser of Kavanaugh said were there and could testify said that would say things like, "I do not remember that." So there's that. But this general Me Too culture of like believe all women regardless of evidence, it's a really boy who cried wolf situation, because we're at the point now where we've been in this type of culture for so long that it kind of lowers the seriousness of the allegation overall, even for the allegations that do have supporting evidence. And I think on a cultural level, that's a really bad thing. So that's number one. Number two is the media stuff. It's very weird that the media is only bringing it up now, right? Because these women were hunted down by these media outlets. Like they conscientiously decided, oh yeah, Russell Brand hooked up with a lot of women. Let's go talk to them and see if he ever did anything wrong. Why they weren't doing this in 2012, when he was, by the way, self-admittedly at this point, a sex maniac. He was on doing, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, was kind of out of it, very much Hollywood lifestyle, going to the Greek lifestyle. Nobody said a word. Nobody asked about it. But only now that he's who he is and has now shaped up in many ways, and is now saying what he's saying about Big Pharma and about the Ukraine war, and saying some Joe Rogan talking points that are anti-mainstream, which has nothing to do with how much I agree with them. By the way, I actually don't really agree with Russell Brand on a ton. The point is that the timing is extremely convenient, and it has been for other people like Brand. Again, this woman about Kavanaugh only came forward after he had the chance to be on the Supreme Court, for example. Same thing with Clarence Thomas with those allegations. Although those two allegations were much less evidence than the allegation against Brand, or one of the allegations against Brand, which we talked about. The other allegations I'm not really going to talk about because they're not really evidenced. There's one with a 16-year-old, and before all my American viewers say, "Oh my God," in the UK, technically 16 is the age of consent. I also think that's gross. I also think that's disgusting. But again, it's not of in itself a crime. So most of the allegations are completely unsupported by ancillary evidence, which is, even if it was true, it's kind of what you'd expect after 10 years because it's been a really long time and because of just the nature of the crime. But one of those allegations does have corroborating evidence, and it doesn't look great. And I'm looking to see it, but it's hard for me. There's an underlying current of having some doubt about this because the media motivation feels so transparent, feels so old and tired and out of a playbook. And again, I'm able to look at this on just the evidence fact. I have that ability. I have the ability to see that this looks bad, but the fact that I feel that tug to be inherently mistrustful of the media on this shows the damage that Me Too culture has done. If you cry wolf too many times, people are going to stop believing you. Even if you have something somewhat credible to say. So we'll see what happens there. I'm interested to see what Brand says. The other thing that I wanted to mention was Joe Biden's impeachment inquiry. We talked about this on the Royal Rumble, and I did not make the best arguments I could. I have to say, I was, in hindsight, I was a little bit disappointed with myself. I didn't say anything that was wrong, but I didn't really make my case as full throatedly as I could. I get a little bit like, I want to compromise. You see, I'm naturally not really disagreeable. I don't really want to fight people. It's something I do because I feel it's good and necessary, but it's not something I want to do. So I didn't make the full throated case for why Biden is almost 100% likely guilty, the way I could have. So Tart, my lovely co-host, he said that there isn't evidence that Joe Biden engaged in corruption. So, for those who do not know, the Congressional House Subcommittee has been looking into Hunter Biden and, through by extension, Joe Biden, because Hunter Biden was walking around the globe picking up bags of cash, despite being, a guy who uses hookers and drugs and has never really done anything that would land him on the board of Burisma. It very obviously looks corrupt that he's willing to pick up all of this money from Ukraine, from China, and from other locations based on just his merit. It's pretty obvious that it happened because of his name. Nobody really disputes that anymore. Nobody says that Hunter Biden earned those jobs just because Hunter Biden's so good at things. It's pretty obviously because of his name. So the next question is did Joe Biden benefit when his son is picking up bags of cash? And the answer to me seems like he must have, right? Because there's a couple of reasons. One, there are text messages of Hunter Biden talking to a close loved one saying that I pay half of dad's bills. Now, he could have been exaggerating. He could not have been, but that's direct. That is evidence that Joe Biden benefited. The only better evidence would be like some sort of direct wire transfer evidence, which again, the House Judicial Committee was trying to get, but has been somewhat blocked by the DOJ. Go figures. Or maybe it was the FBI. The DOJ and the FBI have not been particularly cooperative with the House Judicial Committee. They've had to relent a couple times, but they have been extremely resistant. Who knows why? Maybe it's just because they're doing their job. I don't know. You tell me. Listen to the rest of the facts and tell me what you think. So there's that. But the other thing is that you don't even really need that, because if your son is picking up tons of money based on the fact that he has your last name, that is a benefit to you. If my brother makes a lot of money in a corrupt way because of me, but I don't get the money directly, just my brother does stuff for me using the money, I don't even think you need a wire transfer specifically to Joe Biden's bank account for it to be a benefit to him. Although I will say the fact that Joe Biden is as wealthy as he is and owns as many homes as he is does seem to imply that he has been getting money from places other than Congress and other than just whatever book deals he might have. Just based on the way he lives his lifestyle, it seems pretty obvious to me that he probably benefited from those bags of cash. So the third question is did Joe Biden know that Hunter Biden was trading on his name? Did he know that Biden was using using his dad's influence to make these deals, which would be illegal. There's two defenses. One is that he knew, but he knew that he wouldn't actually use it, and that doesn't matter because, like, saying, "Oh yeah, I was promising some sort of subtle quid pro quo, but I was never going to hold up my end of the bargain," is not a legal defense. That doesn't matter. So the real only defense is saying that Joe Biden didn't know. And this is where I got hung up with Tart because I admitted, and I was not technically wrong, but I didn't fight the way I should have. I admitted that no, there's no direct evidence that Joe Biden knew that Hunter was trading on his name in corrupt and ways, acting improperly as a foreign agent and doing money laundering, I believe it was. Some financial crime relating to, misusing the office of the vice president in a way that's not just like a high crime and misdemeanor, the way that what Trump did was a high crime and misdemeanor, but like an actual crime. So I admitted that there was no direct evidence of that. There's a ton of evidence about why Joe Biden probably should have known, and we're going to go through it in a second. But technically speaking, there is not evidence that Joe Biden knew, and it's going to be very hard to prove that he knew unless you have some sort of explicit thing in writing about him authorizing it or knowing it. And the odds that Joe Biden he's old and he's senile, but he's been in office for a really long time, and I think he knows better than to put stuff down in writing. So the odds that you find that is very low. But let me lay a picture for you, because the narrative from the White House and from the mainstream media has been that Joe Biden is a father and he loves his son. Hunter Biden stays in the White House for weeks at a time. Apparently, they are very close. This is something Biden talks about all the time, and they've been close for years. So imagine that for around a decade, if not more, Joe Biden's son had been training on his name. All of a sudden, he lands a seat on the Burisma board. All of a sudden, he's flying with you on Air Force Two to China, and then he goes off and does some business, and he comes back, and he's richer. When a prosecutor from Ukraine looks into the Burisma board, Biden says, "Make sure that son of a bitch gets fired." And guess what? He gets fired. Now, there's a way of reading that says, oh, yeah, for around a decade, if not more, Joe Biden was blissfully unaware that his son Hunter was using his name to get by. I don't find this reasonable at all. I said yesterday that there's a reasonable doubt there. I'm not really sure that there is. I'm not sure a reasonable person in Joe Biden's shoes, having the relationship that he does with Hunter, being in the office that he's in, seeing the activities that Hunter Biden was engaged in, first and foremost of which being on the Burisma board. And then finally, and I really feel like this is the nail in the coffin, I don't know why the hell I didn't bring it up yesterday, is the fact that he stopped that Burisma board from getting investigated for corruption. He literally stopped it. He used his office as a vice president to get the attorney who was going to investigate the Burisma board that Hunter was sitting on. He was going to investigate it for corruption of the type that is alleged against Biden, and he got that guy fired. So to tell me that a reasonable person could do all that while being pure as the driven snow, while not knowing what Hunter was doing, was not knowing how he was trading on his name, quite frankly, is unreasonable to me. I think it would require an unreasonable amount of ignorance. It is an amount of ignorance that would be unreasonable to assume. I don't think that you can have a son that you're that close to for that long in those sorts of positions and doing those sorts of activities with those sorts of results and not put two and two together. Like, I know Biden is not mentally all there right now, but he wasn't that bad for his entire life. And again, it's not the standard of Joe Biden, the elderly guy. Did he know? Or was he willfully blind? It's not about whether he knew. It's about whether a reasonable person in his new shoes would have known, because it's impossible. It's borderline impossible to know what Joe Biden in his brain actually did or did not know. It's more about what a reasonable person in his shoes would have done. Now, so that's one thing. I gave up the ghost with a Tart a little bit. I kind of compromised. I said, yeah, there's no direct evidence. I wish they would have waited. I do wish they would have waited. I still think that they pulled the trigger early on the impeachment inquiry. I've heard the argument recently that the impeachment inquiry does not actually give you extra subpoena power. It does not give Congress extra subpoena power. It doesn't. However, when there is an impeachment inquiry, despite the fact they don't get technical extra subpoena power, people tend to respect it more. People tend to not be so fighty, and the DOJ and the FBI have been fighty this whole time. So I would suppose McCarthy, who was partially pressured by his right flank, just didn't really just wanted to stop fighting all the time and just wanted to get the subpoena power. And I still think he pulled the trigger too early. I think you should have kept fighting. I think there was more evidence there to be got. And on, as I said on the show last night, on a Machiavellian level, pulling the trigger this early is stupid. Like if the impeachment battle is to hurt Joe Biden, why wouldn't you wait to do that in the general when it actually matters when he's running against a Republican? I don't know. I think it's because McCarthy got pressured by his right flank. Not the decision I would have made. Definitely would have waited for a little bit more evidence. Although, again, I do think that there is more evidence against Biden here than there ever was against Trump for either charge. For the January 6th thing, you still have the problem of intent. He said go peacefully. He said peaceful. Like it's not incitement. It's just not. It's not a crime. They didn't allege a specific crime in either case, actually, because there's were crimes there. He did something bad by waiting too long on January 6th. He should have stepped in immediately and said, don't do this, instead of waiting for 2 hours. I think his ego got in the way, and that's condemnable, of course. But he did not incite a riot. He said go peacefully. It's just, there's no there. It's not there. And then this is the kicker. The first time Trump got impeached, way the hell back in the day, for those who don't remember, he got impeached because he was on the phone with Vladimir Zelensky, and he said he implied that he would not be giving military aid to Ukraine. This was before the Russian war. He would not be sending more military aid to Ukraine unless he investigated the Burisma board for corruption, the same Burisma board that Hunter Biden sat on. Now, he was impeached because they thought this was an explicit quid pro quo to attack his political enemies. First of all, that's hilarious and ironic coming from the Dems. But second of all, this doesn't work because on one hand, if you think he did it just to attack Biden, okay, sure. He's trying to attack his political enemies, but there's a perfectly legitimate national interest to make sure that the country that you are giving millions and millions and millions of dollars of military aid to doesn't have corrupt sectors of its economy and its state. There's a national interest in that. I mean, Ukraine is corrupt famously. I know we all forget that because of the Ukraine-Russian war, but Ukraine's reputation was for being infamously, incredibly corrupt. So Trump saying, oh yeah, you know how you fired that prosecutor because Joe Biden told you to? That prosecutor was looking into corruption. Yeah, before I give you like a whole bunch of military arms, maybe you should keep looking into that. Maybe you should keep cleaning up corruption. That's what he said. And like, of course, Hunter Biden's on the Burisma board. So of course there is that way to assume it, but there is no way to distinguish between which one Trump was after in that scenario. It could have been both. I don't know. You don't know. And a person in Trump's shoes could have gone either way, which is unlike Biden. No reasonable person in his shoes could have been ignorant of what Hunter was doing for over 10 years. There's no way. I do not believe that you can be a father to a son like that. He can, sit on Burisma boards for with no apparent expertise and say, I'm pretty sure he earned that fair and square. Like that's not a reasonable thing to say. So those are the two intros. Finally, our videos have uploaded. So now we'll get into the main course of today's show, which is the retrospective on Vaush. So what is the retrospective on Vaush? Well, 2 weeks ago, as I said, Vaush and the gang all got onto the Royal Rumble together. And we did this, hold on. Up. Sorry, again, Luddite. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not very good at these things. Yeah, we got into it. And the first thing, we talked about a lot of things. So we have 3 segments. We talked about a lot of things, but the first things we talked about were economics. So I want to talk about that first because this is where I think I probably did the worst job. When I was younger, economics was really my thing, but now I've kind of pulled back on that. So it's not quite as epic, I hate to say. Unfortunately, it's true. So we're going to watch this and then we are going to talk about it. I'm going to interrupt every so often and we are going to get going. So yeah, let's hit it. I think everyone's corrupt, but I think at least the shareholders, unlike the government, are interested in getting their profit back, which means they're actually interested in the company's productivity and success in most cases. Sometimes they pump and dump, and I would be totally cool with regulations to prevent that sort of thing.
Why wouldn't elected workers have that same interest though?
Not why wouldn't they have the same interest to get their profit back?
Like, why wouldn't they have the interest to run the company well? If the company doesn't do well, they make less money. Even if they're corrupt, wouldn't they also be monetarily
I thought
incentivized?
we were well on the local level. Sure, I thought we weren't talking about worker co-ops. We were talking about grant allocations.
Well, with grant, we know that government grant allocations can be for the public good because we see it
Sometimes,
happen when it comes to
but like
research.
subsidies also suck. Like part of the like I'm from
Well, not
California
subsidies,
originally.
just grant
There's no
allocations. Like if you
difference. Interruption there. There's no difference between those two things. Um, for all intents and purposes, the government picking winners and losers, picking the horses they want to back, and the ones that they don't, is just a form of central planning. I don't know why I missed this. I don't know why I missed the buzzword. Vaush talks about how he's not a tanky, how he's not like a Soviet style communist, and I believe him that he thinks that. And I don't think he's a full on tanky. And that's why he talks about worker co-ops and stuff instead of a central planning committee. But throughout this, you're going to be hearing him argue for a national level organization that replaces the stock market, and instead of private investors, the entire market deciding what horses they want to bet on, the government gets to decide which businesses it wants to invest in and which ones it doesn't. That is, and like he's saying that it's not the same thing as subsidization. It is, and it's kind of even worse. I think everyone's corrupt, but I think at least the shareholders, unlike the government, are interested in getting their profit back, which means they're actually interested in the company's productivity and success in most cases. Sometimes they pump and dump, and I would be totally cool with regulations to prevent that sort of thing.
why wouldn't elected workers have that same interest though?
Not why wouldn't they have the same interest to get their profit back?
Like, why wouldn't they have the interest to run the company well? If the company doesn't do well, they make less money. Even if they're corrupt, wouldn't they also be monetarily
I thought
incentivized?
well on the local level. Sure, I thought we weren't talking about worker co-ops. We were talking about grant allocations.
Well, with grant, we know that government grant allocations can be for the public good because we see it
Sometimes,
happen when it comes to
but like
research.
subsidies also suck. Like part of the like I'm from
Well, not
California
subsidies, just
originally.
grant allocations. Like if you think you have a promising business idea in downtown and there's like a space that's open, you can like submit a bid and say, "Well, what do I want to do with this space?" Well, I would turn this into a barcade and here's some like concept designs that I have for the floor plan, and then you can make a case for it like at a town meeting or something. Let the public decide, you know? Why should the public have to suffer the opening of a business no one cares for?
This is so Right. weird because Again, he's making the own point against himself. Sorry for the repeat again. I'm still figuring out like to how to actually use this technology. I'm not very good at it, so my deepest apologies there. But he's making my point for me. He's saying why not, instead of having the government centrally decide, we should have a city hall meeting and allow the people to decide which companies they want to back. Guy, that's called the stock market. That's what it is. It's the public deciding which companies they want to back. The difference is before everybody yells at me, the difference is that not everybody gets the same vote. The difference is that complete randos don't get the exact same vote in terms of which companies are good and which companies aren't, as seasoned investors would, or people with a history of success. So in the stock market, the investors who get lots of votes, the rich people who sit on lots of different boards, are the people who most of the time are rich because they make good investments, which means they more reliably pick profitable businesses. Isn't this great? The weight of the votes of the public in terms of which businesses that they should invest in, their votes are weighted based on essentially their success rate at picking businesses that people are interested in. Um, this feels like a better system than the town, or God help us, the nation getting together and everybody having the exact same vote and deciding, do I like a business or do I not like this business? It's not. It seems to be he's very much making my point for me here, and I didn't point it out at the time, and it's mildly disappointing that I didn't, because yeah, okay, see, I figured it out. I figured out the better way to do this. The Ludditeism, it's getting fixed. It's the national level.
Is it because government is icky or something? Like, I'm not following.
I mean, kind of a little bit. You can put
Well,
it that
John,
way.
you did say that quote unquote everyone.
So I said that this type of public square thing where like the public comes in and votes at where they want to put their Pell Grants. Because remember, Vaush isn't saying that we supplement this to the stock market. He isn't saying that, oh yeah, we have some government grants to help out things that we like and that's on top of the normal stock market. No, he wants to basically get rid of the private stock market because that's necessary if you want to end capitalism. And instead just replace the system of investment with a purely governmental system of investment, which he thinks is more democratic. And it could be more democratic if he really thought that we're going to have like national, like public votes on it all the time, which doesn't make sense at the national level. It will only make sense at a local level. But that's like the type of democracy that's not good because for those of you who haven't read any Greeks, like everybody having the same exact vote regardless of expertise doesn't always lead to the best decisions. The stock market is a democracy where your vote is weighted essentially by your success rate. Now, of course, people come in higher or lower based on where they start in a somewhat arbitrary fashion, and of course, that's not fair. But hey, that's property rights. I don't know what to tell you. People pass down their wealth to their kids. If they didn't, people wouldn't think long term, and things would be even worse. So the argument that it's better is not very good to me here. So Don is asking me a question. So that's where we are. Let's
Is corrupt.
Correct. Yeah. So Don asked me if I just think the national. Hold on. Let's back up a little bit.
For it, like at a town meeting or something. Let the public decide. Why should the public have to suffer the opening of a business no one cares for?
Right. At a town, sure, because I think that at that level, the
politics. Well, then how?
So why out of town? The answer is because the people in the town have more expertise. When you're talking about like a national level, like nobody knows anything. But when you're in a local level, like you're tiny, like I don't know, 15,000 person town, you're like this person wants to build a business on this corner of this town, and everybody knows the corner, and everybody knows the person who wants to start the business, and everybody has seen businesses come and go throughout the town. Like these are the type of people who might have a little bit of expertise to give these kinds of grants. Now, it's still less economically efficient than just allowing the market to take its course. But when you're in such a tight-knit community, you can kind of afford to do that because, one, the numbers you're playing with are small enough that the lack of efficiency, because basically the lack of efficiency is somewhat slight, and because you're playing in a small field, therefore the lack of efficiency is proportionally very small. And also because you're in such a tight place that the social fabric kind of makes up for it. But Don's going to ask me a funny question here.
John, but how do you then scale that to the fact that economies are not just localized to your town? They're not. You're almost ignoring the fact that you don't want economies to scale outside of a local area?
No, I don't want this idea of governmental grant approval to generally scale in all things out to the national level.
Is it because government is icky or something? Like, I'm not following.
I mean, kind of a little bit. You can.
Well, John, you did say that quote unquote.
Okay, so this is my worst answer. It's a funny answer, and it's very true. Government is icky. We're gonna make it a T-shirt. But that's not the real reason. The real reason is because once you get up to the national level, you're basically just central planning. Like if you are trying to replace the stock market with government grants, and that's how all investment is happening, you are essentially you are creating not a market economy anymore. Not really. You're creating a centrally planned national economy. And that has never worked. It has always failed. And the reason why is because of that inefficiency part I was talking to you about. If the central planners in the government say, oh, I like this business over this business arbitrarily, and they're wrong. If they put too much subsidization into, potatoes and not enough into, I don't know, car parts, then people don't drive. Or if they go the other way, people starve. The market in its natural form, because it's organic and decentralized, is self-balancing. It makes continuous micro adjustments. There's booms and busts, although most of the time those booms and busts are made worse by governmental interference, including 2008. And people who tell you otherwise have not done the reading. It was private entities did it, but it was in response to artificial government incentives. Do the reading. I'm right on this one. But the point is the market has micro adjustments, and it corrects itself naturally, almost automatically, because it's a decentralized system. But for the government is slow and big, and stupid. And when it goes too far one way, it overcorrects like hell the other way. And I have no reason to think that if we're handing out subsidizations, it wouldn't do the exact same thing. It does it with the Fed already. It already overcorrects with the Fed and with inflation. They're like, oh no, things are bad. Let me print $1 bajillion. Oh no, things are bad. Let me spike the interest rates to God levels. You want to give these people more power over the economy? They've already demonstrated that they're horrible at running the Fed and it's not really their fault. The Fed is like kind of an insane idea. I don't know if I'm in the Fed yet. I don't think so. But it's kind of a crazy idea that like 7 unelected people get to decide how much your money is worth. And that's pretty wild. But you want to hand these people more power. You want to say, actually, not only do they get to decide what your money is worth, not only do they get to decide the interest rate on all of your loans, now they get to decide if you can raise funds for your business. You have to make the case to the government. And this is even assuming the government has perfect virtue. Because, see, this is the second part that is worse. Because I've already explained just like the technical problems with a centrally planned economy, because make no mistake, I did not make this point in the video, but I damn well should have. It's probably the biggest miss of my Royal Rumble career so far, is that what he's advocating for is just central planning. It's just centralized economic planning, and it always fails. Failed in the Soviet Union, currently failing in China. Despite what people tell you, they're building empty cities over there. Their GDP is a ghost. It's not real. They have a problem over there. It's a real problem. Central planning always fails, and it's partially because of that inefficiency, because it's impossible, because of that the information inefficiency, because it's a centralized system. It's not going to be able to automatically self-correct and make micro adjustments. But the second reason is perfect virtue, because now it's not objectively, what the people want, and again, with more weight towards the investors who are bigger. That's true. To Vaush's point, and this is really Vaush's point, is like, look how undemocratic it is. The rich people get bigger economic votes through their investments than the little people do. Now, one, that's true, but two, most of the time that's because they have a track record of picking good businesses, and three, any little person can become a big person if they also invest in companies correctly. There is such thing as class mobility. I know we don't like to talk about that, and I know that our economy is not in a very good spot right now, but basically anybody in the public can gain more of a weight in terms of their investments if they make smart investments. Even on the theoretically, that is undeniably true. And in practicality, it's hard, but there is such a thing as class mobility. So that's true. And Vaush's solution to this, of how undemocratic the stock market is say, hey, what if I put a whole bunch of elected people who might be elected, might be unelected, based off of what I've seen from the government, a lot of it's unelected, but what if I put a whole bunch of essentially politicians and bureaucrats, a chosen few, to make unilateral decisions about which businesses get investment funds and which ones don't? How is that that is less democratic by any measure. That feels less democratic to me. And the reason why the less democratic matters is not because democratic makes good decisions, although I'm continuing to say that because, it makes Vaush's point look kind of ridiculous. But the other reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you have decentralized interests across the stock market, like, political concerns almost kind of cancel out. Again, there's the rich people, and if all of the rich people get in lockstep, like we've seen with ESG and DEI, then there could be problems. But overall, in a natural market system, people will disagree enough that, like, political persuasion will not be like artificially taking over a market. It won't happen. Like, if there's a general cultural ground shift, then investment will reflect that. But there's no way like an over the top like political agenda can just take over an organic stock market, at least not without heavy government interference, which is again what we're seeing now with ESG and DEI, which is literally punishing corporations who don't take these in. So today's system is not really capitalistic, it's more corporatistic. Government's in bed with markets to a large extent, and that's a problem, and it's gross. And it's also a problem with criticizing capitalism in today's day and age, because a lot of the problems with capitalism is problems that arise because of government's interference in capitalism. So there's that. But back to the goddamn point, which I haven't actually got to yet, is while the democracy point does make Vaush's point look kind of ridiculous, it's not really why I'm bringing it up. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because while organic stock markets in a market system are not particularly vulnerable to like political capture, governments are. So like whoever's in like the subsidy committee or like the government allocation of investments, Pell Grants committee, those people and their political agendas will basically control like the entire country. And if you're worried about political agendas, you're not worried about economic efficiency. You're not 100% worried about that. You're probably less worried about that than you should be. Now, I would like a little bit more morality in the stock market, but just a little bit. I don't trust the politicians to share my values when they're doing Pell Grants. I don't trust them at all. I don't trust anybody to represent my values, which is why I prefer a system that kind of is almost value neutral, like an organic stock market. But just imagine that your least favorite political party. So if you're on the right, just imagine AOC and Nancy Pelosi. And if you're on the left, imagine, I don't know, Matt Gaetz and Ted Cruz. And they get to decide if any of these businesses get investment funding or not, which ones they allow and which ones they kill. And now they say it's on the merits of the presentation. They say that. Of course they do. They say it's on the economic merits. But we all know that politics matters and they are responsive to their voters and that they are going to strike down the companies that they feel are not aligned with their values, and they're going to help the ones that are. And the idea that the entire national economy is beholden to political persuasion, to the political persuasion of the people doing the Pell Grants in this system, in this theorized system, is absurdity. It's an absurdity of the highest order. It's an insane idea. It's unbelievable. And even worse, in a system where they're unelected and not responsive to their donors, and instead they're bureaucrats, the question gets worse because they're unelected. The problem gets worse because they're unelected. That doesn't make them neutral. It makes them very difficult to be accountable to. And so one of two things will happen. It'll be a deep state situation where one party will basically take over the bureaucracy, and then you'll have that same political bias for longer. Or we'll have a completely wild, every single time the president changes, he fires everybody in the bureaucracy and replaces them with his guys, which again will have the political switch back and forth intensely. The way the organic market works now is that it has those micro adjustments that prevents the overcorrection back and forth. And also, since there's all these different competing forces, it's almost value neutral, at least when it's not being fucked with by the government to a large extent. His system requires like heavy political influence on where Pell Grants are going. And when you're talking about decisions that affect a national economy, that's insane. That is insane. And that is what he's talking about. He is talking about national Pell Grants. Now, to steal Matt Vaush for a second, because he's not here. We had a good conversation, so if he sees this, I don't think he will. He can respond. If I'm misrepresenting you, please do. I'm just extrapolating based on what you've said. If the idea is that the Pell Grant systems are like they're county level, they're local, and they get less and less local. So there's like a Pell Grant system for local businesses and the bigger businesses, it's still a problem because eventually there's going to be business ideas big enough that they go to the federal. And then the ones that would live and die still have all of the problems, both of information and of virtue. Both of those problems are a problem. This is why central planning fails. It requires perfect information and perfect virtue to work. And those two things do not exist in the human race. It's not true. And capitalism does not require those things. So yeah, I did not make this point. I really should have. I didn't call it central planning, and I should have, because it's just central planning. It just is. Somebody in the Discord actually pointed this out to me after the fact. I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's a good guy. He pointed this out to me, and he was 100% right. So yeah, national Pell Grants is central planning. That's why. It's not just the government. So in conclusion, in summation, I was 100% right off the get-go where I said, yeah, it's kind of icky. That's when I said, yeah, it's kind of icky. You just have to copy paste this entire monologue about the failures of central planning. And that's what I mean when I say, yes, the government at the national level is kind of icky. That's what I mean. So whenever I say something about why the national government is icky in terms of messing around with the economics, I need you to copy and paste this monologue for the foreseeable future. Cool. I knew you'd agree.
Quote, everyone is corrupt.
Correct. It's true.
Ooh, that's a rough
you have
one.
to make that assumption anyway.
Well, I think I worry about that because I feel like
So right there, I'm saying everybody is corrupt. I'm saying that you have to assume everybody's corrupt. It's the same point I just made. It's about the perfect virtue thing. It's like, okay, everybody's corrupt, but at least the people in the stock market, one, counterbalance each other out to some extent, because they're all competing against each other's individual moral interests, and two, they might be morally corrupt, but they also need the business to succeed because they have skin in the game. Not really true for the national government. They don't really give a shit about how much money they waste. They just want to, do stuff that makes them feel good or that sounds nice. I was talking to Brian Kaplan the other day. We had that interview, and he said that the government does stuff that sounds nice but is bad, and the market does stuff that sounds bad but is nice. That's basically what would happen. So yes, when I'm saying I have to assume everybody's corrupt, therefore stock market, that's why. We've already talked about it.
Like everyone is corrupt is kind of a giant cope, because in reality, like, history is full of examples of organizations and people who have been noble or ignoble, people who have been competent or incompetent, people who have been truthful and not. And it
Yeah.
seems like more often than not, it doesn't just because, like, saying, well, everyone's corrupt is kind of like a person defending capitalism and saying, well, everyone is greedy. That's not true. If you look anthropologically, humans rose to the top of our
No, so yeah, he misunderstands me. I says everybody has the capacity for corruption, and given enough power, enough people will fall to it that you have to build your systems in such a way that you control for it. And also, everybody is greedy. It's one of the seven deadly sins. It's a character of human nature. We all have these negative instincts. When I say everybody's greedy, I mean everybody is tempted to greed to some extent. Like there might be some people who are blessed in such a way that that's not really a huge temptation for them, but most people have a greed streak, just like they have a wrath streak and a lust streak and a pride streak and all that sort of thing. And me saying everybody is greedy doesn't mean everybody is solely motivated by greed. It doesn't mean that we're not pro-social, but it means that we also are kind of greedy, and that's a thing that exists and that our systems have to account for. I'm probably going to answer in the clip, but yeah, I'm not saying everybody is corrupt always and everybody is acting out of greed always. I'm saying that everybody has the capacity for that. The line between good and evil runs through every human heart, and our systems of government and our systems of society need to recognize that fact and prepare for it.
planet because of our cooperative abilities. And
That's
we
right.
try we
These are not contradictory. You can be greedy and have a capacity for corruption and also be cooperative. These are not contradictory ideas at all. There's no contradiction here.
try to rationalize like why things are. I think things are the way they are because of material interest. I think that for all of human history, it's been very easy to accumulate power and wealth in a small centralized hierarchy. And as time has gone on, we've tried to push back against that. Like we have liberalism, we have the concept of democracy, and we found that like because I feel like if you
We have markets instead of feudalism. It's decentralized. People rise and fall. No, I don't think he agrees with that.
if you like went back 1,000 years ago and you had like a bunch of peasants talking, they'd be like, "Wow, our king is like a drunken, incestuous, murderous lunatic who like slaughters people who
So,
disagree." And then they're like, "Oh, everyone's like that. If you were king, you'd do the same." They're like, "Mm-mm," and it's like, well, no, actually, that's not true. Because maybe the institution of king makes monsters of men, but
yes,
men aren't necessarily like that.
right, but you want to make a king. That's what you want to do. Like, see, this is the thing. Again, Vaush is kind of proving my point here. Secretly based Vaush makes my point for me. No, yeah, no, men naturally have a capacity for greed. That doesn't mean we're always greedy. That's true. Maybe the office of the king is infinitely corrupting. True. Buddy, you want to create that by creating boards that get to decide which companies get funded by tax dollars or not, especially at national levels. You are creating a king seat. That is a ungodly amount of power. You want to talk about how like rich people who can go to Australia. He says this other elsewhere in the show. You can find it on my YouTube channel. You can find the show. You should go watch it. It's great. It's clipped to just the parts with me in it, which are the best parts. Um, sorry, I can't even be serious about that because that's not true. But it is true that it's clipped just to me. But buddy, like he talks about how like the amount of power that rich people have is ungodly, and it's like okay, but again, they got their power in a certain way, and people can say no to them if they want to. Um, and you're telling me that your solution to this is instead of, allowing for people to rise and fall in the market, that you want to have a permanently ungodly high seat for the government, of which would be a national Pell Grant Council. That is a king seat. You say king seat might always corrupt men. That is the king seat. That will always corrupt people. That is too much power to control the levers of the economy, even more than the Fed, to control business, to control people's rights of property, to not really control rights of property, but control the levers of people's prosperity, like directly. Like, not just in, oh, here's inflation and here's interest, and like changing the rules of the game on the fly, which is bad enough, which is what the Fed does. But the players can react to the changing of the rules. No, this isn't the changing of the rules. This is saying, oh no, we just get to decide if we give you extra monopoly money or not, and we just get to decide. Like, that is the king seat. That is corrupting. That is arguably more powerful than most kings ever were. That is an ungodly amount of power. So again, Vaush kind of making my point for me. If he's saying that seats of power are what corrupts, but man is not naturally corrupt, buddy, you are the one creating the corrupting position in your system. My system has the capacity for people to raise to enough power to become corrupt, but they can easily fall out of that position easily. And they only get there by by basically supporting companies that are doing good. It harnesses greed to create productivity. This harnesses political aspirations to create, I don't know, arbitrary judgment about which businesses are good and which ones aren't. Judgments made when you have no skin in the game economically and only politically. Like, again, look at the fucking history record, man. That doesn't tend to work out well.
And I think it's kind of like that, Worker co-ops already exist, and people there tend to be happier and more productive and produce more wealth than people at traditional corporations. So it's like, maybe people aren't all corrupt. Maybe we can build systems.
Well, again, this is just kind of a non sequitur. Like, it's so much easier to see why Vaush is wrong in hindsight. Like, in the conversation, I don't know what it is. Like, my brain goes down to like 70% efficiency, which is still good, but it's not the best. For some reason, when I'm like shit posting in a flannel on a Monday night, when I have better things to do, my brain works better for whatever reason. But this is a non sequitur. Like, I'm not talking about worker co-ops. I'm talking about a national Pell Grant system, which is what he was talking about. Co-ops are perfectly consistent with the market. There's nothing wrong with worker co-ops as long as it's voluntary, right? As long as everybody's doing it because they want to do it, as long as nobody's getting kneecapped, the way that the unions did back in the day on occasion. Yeah, it's fine. My grocery store in my hometown is a co-op, as far as I'm aware. As far as worker co-ops being like more wealthy and more efficient, I don't know how much of that is causational. Like, I'm just gonna take Vaush's word for it that the stat is true. Maybe it is true, but I imagine that because co-ops are kind of rare, you could make an argument it's more of a correspondence thing, that it's more about the factors that make co-ops happen are the same types of factors that make you like very rich. Like, I don't know. It's just to say that stat is not like the slam dunk he thinks it is, both because one, it's completely off topic from what I was saying, and two, that stat doesn't slam dunk the point. It's nice support, but it doesn't slam dunk the point. It doesn't make the point alone. Let me explain myself. When I say, yeah, everyone's corrupt, I'm not saying that literally everyone everywhere is corrupt. I'm saying that when you build systems, especially the larger you get, right? Because the social fabric tends to get thinner the more you scale any system. You should make the underlying assumption that everybody is self-interested. Yeah. So for this, I make the point on principle, instead of just calling it central planning and going from there. I kind of start without the label, and I never really get up to the label, which would have kind of like clicked the neurons for me. I mean, I'm right that at the national level, you don't have the social fabric that prevents the political corruption. At the local level, people have better information than people at the national level could possibly have. No matter how good of a business plan you give them, you're not going to have as good of information as locals would about a small local business. So I was right, and I was making a lot of the points that you would make in a central planning case, but the fact that I didn't slap the central planning label on it when it clearly was an example of that is a failure on my part, 100%. Okay, we are going to go to clip number 2 now. Hold on a moment. I'm going to play another. I'm going to play another video. Yes, sorry, Luddite. Hold on. I don't know if anybody is watching this, and honestly, I'm not going to go look at stream to find out, because I'm that guy. I don't need to go look. I don't need to look. No, you guys are loving it. I don't like that view. I prefer this view. Prefer this view. Kind of small, but we are going to let it go here. We are upset because the news noticed and told people, and then they started to notice. Like, why
So
is
what did
the
they
I mean,
notice?
no, but
What
I
el-
just I don't think you're I don't think
Okay, so for those without context, let me break in here real quick and explain what's going on. We are talking about the uh, the um, the lack of policy, as Vaush points out, is what it technically is. The lack of policy around teachers being mandated to tell parents if those parents' children start, dressing as the opposite sex or asking for different pronouns or like using a different name in school that they use at home. It is my position and the position of many Americans that, yeah, I think teachers should probably tell parents that. I think that's probably something it would be good for parents to know. Um, that's my position. So we've been talking about this, and up until this point, um, it has become apparent to me that throughout the conversation, they talk about media control, they talk about narrative control, they talk about how this isn't even a policy, it's a lack of a policy, it's a lack of a mandate. And it's like, it's very rare. And to me, none of this really addresses the core issue. And what I led with, as you just heard, is it sounds like you're not you're just kind of mad at people for noticing that this is a thing that is allowed and this is a thing that can happen and may start to happen more often. Like, it seems that you're just mad at people for noticing. That's how I led. And now I didn't start the conversation that way, but that's how we're starting this clip. So that's the context. So away we go.
you're well established to argue about impartiality in media when you refer to this as a policy. Like, again, the teachers not telling the parents of students about the students saying that they're trans or want different pronouns in class. This is as relevant and as meaningful as saying Walmart employees will use the pronouns
That's
they're
not
asked to.
true, though.
No,
Interact
it
with your
is.
teacher every day, all the
It
time.
doesn't matter.
Public school, all the time.
No
It's your
one,
primary social environment. These
no
are
one has
not
ever. It
remotely
doesn't.
comparable situations. Yeah, good job past me. I caught this one 100%. Yes, it's not a policy. It's a lack of a policy, which he knows exactly what the fuck I meant. Like, I know he thinks it matters as a difference. I don't think it matters. The point is that teachers are not obligated to tell parents. That's a problem. I don't care if that's because of a positive rule or a negative rule. I don't care. Or a lack of a rule rather. But this comparison to Walmart, this is the second time in the conversation that he makes this point. This point is fucking insane. A Walmart employee, like, when you give a kid to a public school, you are charging that child into the school's care. No employee is of Walmart is charged with the care of every minor that enters its store. That's not true. That's not how it works. The bargain between parents and public schools is that the kid is on loan to you from the parent. That you have been charged with the child's care. That's number one. And then number two is the point that I actually made, which is that it's not like a Walmart you walk through and you walk away. You don't have relationships with Walmart employees. The Walmart isn't a child's primary social environment. A public school is. A public school is the primary social environment of a child. And the the teacher is the primary overseer of that child and of that social environment. None of these things are true of a Walmart employee. This comparison is absurd. I'm glad I caught it. I would have been unbelievably embarrassed if I let that slide during the show. I do not like Vaush made this argument two times. I don't know why. I do not know why he thought this was a strong argument, but it most certainly was not in my mind. Oh, look at that. We have 0 viewers. That is fantastic. I love it. That's okay. We'll get viewers on the recording later. Guaranteed. Will happen. You just got to believe.
No one has ever fronted the idea that teachers have to disclose this information to parents. And the idea that they should have to just because some trans people exist is ludicrous. We're literally like imposing this. First of all, I would argue it's a pro-grooming belief because the people most likely to groom children are the family or people directly adjacent to the family, not teachers, not even close.
Yeah.
So I think that by like so many
I'm having an aneurysm listening to this. Yeah. I think conservatives have been fronting the fact that parents should tell their teachers to tell the parents basically everything about what's going on with their kids. I think conservatives have believed that for a very long time. So that didn't come out of nowhere. Although it's been raising recently because, the great crime of people noticing the type of stuff that teachers have not been needing to tell parents. That's number one. Number two is, this is a very weird point that this just shows Vaush's mindset is he doesn't see a real distinctive difference between parents in the state. I don't think. I think it becomes evident throughout this conversation if you watch the whole thing that like he kind of compares like parents to a tyranny at one point. But here he just says parents like groom more. I'm like, well, statistically that's probably true, but who cares? Because it has nothing to do with just authority. Ultimately, you either believe that parents have ultimate authority over their children or don't. And just because parents could groom them, which again makes sense because parents are with their children more often. So, like on a statistical level, it's just like you have more exposure between parents and kids. So, statistically speaking, you'd expect more of basically any statistic of any descriptor than you would have. I mean, it's possible he meant like per capita of like hours of time together, like maybe like per hour, but I kind of doubt. I'm sure it was probably a overall thing, which is again what you'd expect because parents are primarily with their kids, so that's what you'd expect. But it doesn't matter. There's just the question of parents have ultimate authority over their kids or they don't. And Vaush seems to be drawing kind of a real moral equivalence between the state and the parents, and is being very utilitarian. Otherwise, I don't think he sees any natural right of parental authority here, which I find deeply concerning.
Instances of sexual and physical abuse are found out because students disclose it to teachers, and I think that
Nothing about my position makes that less likely, by the way. I just want to point that out there. I just want to put that out there. Nothing about what I said says that that's not okay or good. That is good. If you're being abused by your parent, you should tell some other adult in your life. There should be other adults in your life other than the parents as a kid. You should have other adults who you know. This is true. Nothing that I said contradicts this at all.
environment of comfort is really, really important because the social narrative that teachers are all like gunning for the opportunity to trans children is completely nonsense, you know?
I don't know. Have you been on TikTok lately? I've seen some stuff I don't like. Oh, that's very rare. Okay, well then you would be cool with us having a rule to make sure it never happens. Oh wait, no, you're bad. See, this is the thing. We'll get to it. I'm kind of jumping the gun here. But yeah, it's rare, but it happens, and it's also people get shouted down for saying that it's bad on the internet regularly. And I realize internet isn't real life, and that's true precisely up until the point where the internet suddenly does become real life. People call that a slippery slope fallacy. And it's a fallacy if I say that's going to happen for sure, which I'm not saying. I'm saying that it will likely happen. And the reason for that is historical precedent. I've seen the country slide down slippery slopes over the last 10 years consistently. Expecting a likely similar trend is not fallacious. So that's one thing. And also, again, it doesn't matter. Why is he talking about likelihoods? I'm trying to talk about the principle of the thing here.
So this
Not
fear
all.
mongering is basically just the hysteria of conservative parents who don't want anyone to have any control over their kid but them. But their kid is their own person, and they have a
I
right
also
to you.
That's weird. No, 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 that's weird. First of all, he's overstating the case. He's not saying that conservatives want nobody to have any control over their kid but them. Some conservatives believe that, but the mainstream conservative position is not that parents are the only adults with authority over their children. That's not what they say. They say parents are the ultimate authority over their children. And the only way the parents can forfeit that authority is through actual abuse, not like what they think is abuse, which is just saying, oh, you think you're a girl? Maybe let's wait before, we start socially transitioning you. Maybe let's just wait a second and see if you grow out of it. Because for those who don't know, something like between 80 and 90% of kids who display a level of gender confusion grow out of it by the time they're 18. And most of those people wind up being gay. So very high percentage. I think very, very high percentage. According to Vaush, and this is later in the conversation, I don't know if it's in this clip, that's kind of abusive. According to this conversation and the people I'm talking to, that's not actual abuse. The only way a parent can forfeit their ultimate authority over the kid is to be actually physically abusive. And there's probably a level of like mental torture, like if you're berating your child constantly, if you're psychologically tormenting them. Although it's a thinner line because psychological torment means different things to me than it does to them, and it's a fuzzy line that I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with the government at this point in time defining because I don't trust their definitions of what that means. But certainly parents can lose their ultimate authority if they do actual real abuse. Um, but notice how nothing about that conservative position about parents having ultimate authority over other parents unless they give it up using abuse. Notice how none of that gets rid of the idea of any other parents in having any level of control in the kid's life. Of course, other parents have a level of control, and other adults have a level of control and a level of authority, just not equivalent to the parent. That's the point. That is the entire point. Oh, I think my banner has been blocking my face this whole time. Is that true? Oh, how embarrassing. I am so sorry, my friends. That is embarrassing. How embarrassing. We are going to do this.
Use
Yeah,
different
I don't
pronouns
agree with
and
this.
But I want to
think
add that a teacher's job is not to report to parents. If a child or a
it
student
is.
comes to a teacher with the
Yes,
problem
it
that
is.
they have or an issue that they're facing, and that's something that the teacher feels is necessary because teachers are mandatory reporters for abuse. They feel that they refer to a counselor or they refer to the school psychologist to go ahead and take that to help that kid do what they need to do or deal with the issue.
Yeah, you can do both things, right? I mean, assuming that the kid isn't telling the teacher about actual abuse, you can refer them to a school psychologist, and you can also tell their parents what's going on with their kid. I think if it's serious enough to get referred to a school psychologist, I think it's probably within the parent's right to know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just crazy and traditionalist, but I do think that if a school is sending your kid to the school psychologist, I mean, I know my parents got called every time I skinned my knee and got a band-aid. You're telling me that if you get sent to a school psychologist because you want to be called by a different name all of a sudden, that's not rising to the level of something that parents have a right to know? Maybe I'm just old fashioned. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. If there's any parents who watch this video, let me know. Let me know what you think.
Issues they have to deal. The teacher, that's not what's happening here. Like we talked about the numbers of how many trans kids are actually getting like surgeries, under the age of 18 and whatever those numbers are. It's about 200 something in the last year, and then we look at the fact that immigrants are.
I did it. I said yet. I said for now. And that's not even the best way to write this argument, which is first, yeah, for now. The problem is that if this lack of a policy continues to exist, conservatives feel, I think wisely, that the numbers are going to grow there. I don't think they're crazy to think that. I think that that's a distinctly likely possibility, although not certain. If I said it was certain, it'd be a fallacy, but likely. But that's not the real point. The hold on, what is the real point? I missed it.
Trans kids are actually getting like surgeries, under the age of.
Yeah, it's not just about surgeries. It's about social transitioning. It's about puberty blockers. And the reason why those matter is because, first of all, puberty blockers are not reversible. It's not true. It's not the case. Messing with your bones. There's no way you can stop somebody who's already going through puberty, put it on pause, and restart, and your body be reversible. You know why? Because you can't go back in time. The fact that your puberty is starting later does affect you. It does. Do the reading. Do all of the reading. Don't just look at one blog by one psychologist, because even experts have political biases. Read a lot of stuff, and you will find that puberty blockers, when instituted after puberty has already started, absolutely is not reversible. But that's not the point. The point is that social transition and stuff like that makes it less likely that somebody will grow out of it. I believe. I don't know if there's. That would be the argument anyway. I'm not sure if there's statistics on that. I would love to see that measured. I kind of doubt anybody's gonna, get around to measuring that, because people don't want to study this because it makes you kind of unpopular. But I think it's reasonable to say that if you do watchful waiting, people are going to grow out of it more often than they'll grow out of gender confusion if you constantly affirm them. If every adult in their life is affirming them, that seems like a reasonable presumption to make. And in absence of data, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I don't know why anybody would find that unreasonable. Affirmation from adults make it more likely that you will persist in an activity than non-affirmation from adults. Or okay, some of them might persist anyway, and those people really do have gender dysphoria, but a lot of people don't. Again, that's why you have the 80 to 90% number of kids who express gender confusion growing out of it by the time they're 18. So assuming there's no assuming that they're not actively affirmed. So that's why it's not because people are worried about their kids suddenly going under the knife. It's because they're worried, hey, my kid might be going through a phase right now, and he could grow out of it, and that would be ideal because if he grows out of it, he's going to have a less distressing life. He's going to have a better shot at the family that I've had so much meaning doing. You have a better shot at having your own kids and stuff like that people view as genuine social goods, as genuine, meaningful goods for their kids to have. And seeing that the state is making it less likely for their kid to grow out of it and have those meaningful experiences and those meaningful opportunities, and they're doing it and not telling the parents about it, yeah, people are kind of ticked off. Of course they are. Of course they are. So, Don blowing it down to, oh, only 200 surgeries first so far. And second, that's not what it's about, man. Not what it's about.
18 and whatever those numbers are, it's about 200 something in the last year. And then we look at the fact that immigrants aren't committing higher crimes, right? So like your analogy is if the world was different, then the world would be different.
That's not what I
But
said.
it's not different.
For those of you completely lost, I was lost too. There was like a running like immigrant analogy here, kind of like about narrative control. Basically, I don't care. Like, yeah, Fox like made it a story because they decided to make it a story. True. But the issue still exists. I don't care about the delivery system. There's a real principled reason to object to this type of policy. Again, mad for noticing is the vibe that I get. Like, yes, media corporations have an interest in spinning things into stories. Also, they spun this. So yeah, they use rhetorical tactics to make this seem shocking. Also, this is genuinely actually shocking, and there's a fundamental value disagreement. Like, who cares? I just don't care. I just don't care.
Right? If the news reported on the fact that for example, does Fox News?
I was making the analogy more accurate. That's all.
Yeah, but the analogy is if things are different, then things are different. But things aren't different. Fox News lies. They literally lied about CRT and they lied about the trans problem. And
that's not true. So I didn't have the facts ready at the hand. This is usually when people make like bald-faced like fact claims about like this is not true. I usually don't respond in the moment because I do a lot of things and I don't always like remember the last time I fact checked some of my beliefs. So I always just say, okay, well, I'd have to see the facts on that. I'm not going to accept that, but let's just move on from this point. That's not true. So, oh god, this is already long. I only have like 3 clips, and all of them are short, and yet we're talking a lot. So CRT is a legal theory. Originally, it's called critical race theory. It's common in law school and university. Critical theory is very common in university. So when conservatives say people are getting taught CRT in law school, in elementary school, they don't mean you're being taught literal CRT, like the actual theory by like Derek Bell. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that the kids are being taught like a simplified, washed down version of CRT, which is essentially the idea of racial essentialism in society. It's basically the idea that race does in fact really matter in society. It matters to you personally and how you act and how you treat each other. Your skin color matters. That's essentially what people discovered. If you want to look up Christopher Rufo's on the ground reporting, you can. These people don't like Christopher Rufo. That's fine. I don't care. He's an investigative journalist who was on the ground in Virginia. You can go look into what he was saying, and you can go look into the facts that they say to debunk him. See if you're convinced. But the thing about like CRT isn't being taught, it's like you're a bad for noticing person. So it's like essentially CRT isn't being taught, and it's like, well, what they're really saying is that the legal theory isn't being taught, and like, yes, of course, but a dumbed down version of it's being taught, and I don't like it, and I want to get rid of it. I think kids should not be taught that their race matters all that much. They should be taught to see each other as human beings, and also be taught about the history of the people who thought that race really did matter, and teach them even about. You can even teach them that some of those historical events have impacts in the here and now. They have their echoes, but to say that like you're an oppressor versus you're not, that sort of thing is not appropriate. It depends on the line. So you can say that, and I say, okay, well, I don't want that banned. I don't want kids to be taught about race, especially not in elementary school, maybe in high school. But kids shouldn't be taught that race is really that big of a deal in elementary school. if you say that, they say it's not happening. I say that you shouldn't be teaching elementary kids that race is all that important, and they say no, you're a bigot. Well, it's like, okay, so either it's not happening, and also it's bad that it is. That's the mission. Again, it's mad for noticing. It's what it looks like to me, anyway.
And they lie about the fact that immigrants are more criminal. Like
Lie about the trans kid stuff? No, because like we've just been talking about how that lack of a policy exists. Like you can see the teachers on TikTok for one, but two, you know what the policy is. You know they don't have to tell you. They can socially transition your kid. Your kid can show up to school and use a different name and go by different pronouns and even wear different clothes and then get back in the car with the parent looking like they did in the morning. And the kid and the adults will, in the school and the teachers will not tell you. They will not tell you that this is happening. And for some parents, they feel like that and for some parents, I think it's more likely that their kid won't grow out of the confusion and will, because some kids have genuine gender dysphoria that can't be gone, and some kids are just gender confused and will grow out of it if you leave it alone and you don't affirm it. And that's a problem. That's not a lie. We just talked about how the policy exists. When he says that they're lying about it, he's saying that they're bringing it up and I don't like it. And they're saying that there's not very many examples of it, and yet people are really mad about it. That's not lying. That's you not liking the reaction. That's you not liking the values of the people who are reacting to the data. It's not lying. It's you not liking that people are noticing.
these are all lies.
Mm-hmm.
Can you not see that?
The immigrant things commit more crime. I don't know if Fox ever said that. I don't again. I'm going to plead ignorance on that one. I don't know enough about that one.
They did get sued by Dominion for
massively depends on the case, and I'd have to. The Dominion thing was complicated. That's not really what happened. It's more complicated than that. To look into it. So I think we can end the segment here. Here's what I'll say. I think that the primary fundamental disagreement is about parental authority. I think unlike every other person in this room, I think that teachers are mandated that parental authority supersedes government authority. Correct. And when it comes to their children in almost every case, and if a teacher experiences or notices a developmental feature or development in a child that is of sufficient significance, they do have an obligation to report it to the parents because the kid fundamentally falls under the authority of the parent. Somebody just said why. Okay. If you're a person on this stream at some point, I mean, there's nobody watching this stream, but if anybody does eventually watch this stream later and you're like, why? I don't understand why parents naturally get ultimate authority over their kids, why they naturally have more authority than a random state employee. If you don't understand that, then it's going to be very difficult for us to share a country. Because that's just kind of a baseline societal assumption that parents have rights over their kids, that there is such a thing as parental authority. That's one of the ones that you kind of either agree with it or you don't. And I can make some natural law arguments. I can make some utilitarian arguments about cultural cohesion and social fabric and families are the little platoons of society. And all of that is very well and good. But ultimately, you either believe that or you don't. And if you don't believe that, if you don't believe that parents have a level of authority over their kids that supersedes basically everybody else's, then I can't help you. And it's going to be difficult to share a country in the long term, unfortunately. Parents, not the government.
But wait, but you're
Oh, that's the end of that. Haha. See, I can't upload videos that are too long, so we're sticking with 3 minutes. Luckily, it's been long enough because I can't shut the hell up. Okay, here is the after party finally because my bedtime was 5 minutes ago because I wake up early. But so this was after the stream. This is Vaush reacting to me. You guys didn't get to see this. This was on Vaush's stream. So little tidbit. Let's see what he said about me. It's really, it's important to me deeply. It's deeply important to me what Vaush thinks about me.
A fascist or retard. John is smart and not a fascist.
So I don't know how to feel about this. I'm glad that he thinks I'm smart. I think that I think Vaush is articulate and I think he knows his arguments well. I think that his points are fundamentally absurd for the reasons that I've laid out, but I also didn't say those in the moment because in the moment you're never as good as you could be. So, assuming that Vaush wasn't as good as he could be and neither was I, and also realizing that he didn't actually get to hear me make these points in these ways and he might be able to respond, I don't want to say I don't want to say that he's not smart. He came off very articulate. He came off like he knew what he was doing. I just think his points aren't insane. So nice that he called me smart. That's very sweet. He called me not a fascist. And this is true. I am not a fascist. However, Vaush calls everybody a fascist. Vaush calls lots of people that I think are really good on things a fascist, because he uses the term in a very, let's say, loose way. Let's put it nicely. He uses it in a loose way. So it's definitely a dub, the fact that he called me smart. I'm not sure if it's a dub or an L that he didn't call me a fascist, because I'm not a fascist, but I'm not in actuality. But I feel a lot of kinship with some of the people that Vaush thinks are fascists. They are not fascist either, but Vaush thinks they are. So me not identifying with those people in his mind is interesting. Again, I wasn't very combative during the show, so that might be why. But we'll see.
I think John is probably one of those. John is one of those social conservatives who's very easily lured into fascism because he's susceptible to the narratives. Everything is like prime for him. He thinks that people.
It is true that I am very socially conservative. It is not true that I'm particularly susceptible to the narratives. You're going to hear why. So the reason he thinks I'm susceptible to the narratives is because it's because I said I didn't care about Fox News' narrative control. That's not because I'm susceptible. That's not because I'm blind and susceptible to the narratives. It's because I'm aware of the narrative and I realize it doesn't matter in the face of the material. It's just not important to me. It's the principle is what matters. The fact that Fox News artificially spun it up doesn't make the reality on the ground any different. So he sees it as susceptibility. It's not. I mean, everybody's susceptible to narratives to some extent, because we're all humans. But like me being especially susceptible to narrative based on the facts of what I just laid out, that's not really reasonable.
Are like naturally greedy and corrupt, so he has a low
Not natural capacity for greed and corruption.
opinion of institutions and social standards.
That's not true, actually. I have low opinions of today's institutions and social standards because I think that they're wrong. I think that they don't protect against greed and corruption correctly. However, as a conservative, my natural instinct is to have a deep respect for social standards and for institutions. I just don't respect a lot of today's social standards and institutions because I find them not in line with history. Social standards and institutions hold inherent weight to me because they come from the ages, they come from the past, they're stable, they've been around for a long time. But since the left's long march through the institutions, our modern social standards and institutions were spun up within the last half decade. So they don't mean a lot to me. They're not very old. So you can't use that to grab my reverence. And I have a million reasons. I don't think they promote virtue. I don't think that they hem against human fallibility. So it's not that I don't have respect for social standards and institutions. I just don't have respect for most of today's social standards and institutions. It's purely circumstantial. I don't know why that makes me a fascist, though. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I guess it's like I'm more willing to overthrow stuff, but that's not true. I don't want to overthrow stuff. I'd rather just reform it quickly. But that's not reforming quickly isn't exactly the same thing as revolution.
He has a very strong impression of self-determination, even though he opposes self-governance and government in like the economy.
A very strong opinion of self-determination. Fact check true. The individual is sacred. But I have a low opinion of self-governance in terms of government first and also the economy. I have a low opinion of self-determination when it comes to government because while people are good at running their individual lives, people tend to be very bad at running their societies because people are dumb and they don't know anything. I also think that it's the best system we have. So, as much as I bitch about it, having a government that's accountable to the people is very important. The people are in the long run sovereign. I believe, because they all carry a spark of the divine, and God is the sovereign, and therefore the people, by extension, are also sovereign, to a certain extent. Definitely more than the government is. So not really. That's not really right. I have a high opinion of self-determination. I have a low opinion of self-determination in government. True, but it's higher than basically every other governmental system. And a low opinion of self-determination in economics, that's fucking laughable. It's the exact opposite. I believe in markets. I believe in the stock market. Bro, you're the guy who wants a centralized body to decide on a whim who gets an investment and who doesn't. I'm not the one here. Yeah, that's just wrong. That's just not true.
He doesn't seem to take He doesn't seem to be that like concerned with the media manipulation present behind all the trans-panic stuff.
I'm concerned with media manipulation. I write about it all the time. Actually, I'll try to spin it into content at some point. The media manipulation matters. I don't think it matters in regards to the trans content specifically, because underneath the media manipulation, the facts are still the facts, and the facts are worrying even without the manipulation. So who gives a fuck? You know, I don't think that makes me naive. I think that just makes me, I don't know, incisive.
Sounds like you're describing a libertarian. Libertarians are all either fascists or on the way to being fascist.
I am not libertarian. That's a great insult. See, I'm an adult, so I'm not libertarian. You know, I love all my libertarian bros. I'm kind of kidding. So no, I'm not libertarian. Also, libertarians usually aren't socially conservative. So smart, true, not a fascist, also true, but not true in the way he meant it. Basically, every other descriptor of me was slightly off. You know, it might be my fault, but you know, I'd like to think it's a little bit his fault too. So let's let the intro ride, and I think we'll be done for today. Thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate it. This is the first time I did a solo show without a guest, without it being a Royal Rumble. I hope you all enjoyed it. Going forward, I'm going to be better about creating video clips for the show. Again, the uploads took too long. They took longer than I expected. I'm still getting used to the new software that we're on, but I really do like it. And I really do like all of you guys. I have one viewer currently. Let's go. Good to see you. Hopefully there will be more on the recording. Whoever that is, you are my bro. Thank you for hanging out. One guy, and he's on YouTube. Nice. But you caught me at the end of stream here. So I'm going to say goodbye. We're going to let the intro ride, and we are going to go to sleep. See ya.